to the county manager just to walk over what's outlined here, and then we'll move to discussion before we vote on this item. So County Manager O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Sorry, papers everywhere. So I'm just, the background and rationale for the request for board action is already clearly laid out. I don't intend to read it all. I'm happy to answer any specific questions that are here. We spoke at length a few weeks ago on some of the different challenges that we faced over the past year. But part of the goal moving forward, as we come with a very serious ask today, recognizing that absent additional funding, the county cannot close its books on 2022, and the significance of that ask for the board. Part of my responsibility in partnership with all of you is ensuring that we are putting in place the appropriate structures and processes to learn from where we've been and ensure success moving forward on behalf of all areas of our organization and on behalf of the community that we are all here to serve. There are a series of recommendations starting on page 71 in the packet on that request for board action. I can just briefly mention them to you. Some of them, and it's all delineated in here, some of these recommendations require the county board to actively take an affirmative authorization to make it happen, and then a few of the other pieces fall under my delegated authority as the county manager in the charter. Starting with number one, the idea that requests for proposals be brought back to the board for approval. There has been delegated authority to departments to increase the speed and efficiency at which we contract. But when we see significant overspending, we think it's important to take back some of the speed and efficiency to ensure due diligence and transparency, working directly with this board moving forward. Number two, there are two personnel benefits and transactions assistants that work in the sheriff's office. This is one of the final areas in the county that has not been consolidated under our approach to how we are doing personnel benefits and transactions work for the organization. This proposal is to move those two positions into HR as a continued step along that centralization work. That ensures consistency across approaches. It ensures timely updating of information in people's personnel records in our online system, and for everybody to be able to see the same information, which is helpful as we work on future promotions or disciplinary work or other pieces along the way. It allows us all to be working from the same transparent information. Require the use of cooperative contracts, which is the county can purchase off of contracts through cooperative purchasing. We're going to move toward enhanced review with the chief financial officer to ensure that contracting stays within spending limits that are available, and that if questions come up along the way, the CFO can work directly with the sheriff's office to support them in their purchasing work. We're going to conduct enhanced reviews of all procurement, cards, and purchase orders. This is another way. There's contracting, then there's other types of purchasing. This explains that step as well to ensure that every month we're doing our due diligence to make sure spending aligns with outcomes. We're going to engage a third-party auditor to review budgetary line items monthly with the sheriff's office and report back to myself, the compliance and ethics officer, and then up to the Ramsey County Audit Committee, which involves a few commissioners as well. This is a way to make sure that the information we are seeing throughout the year feels consistent with what we see at the end of the year, and that was one of the challenges that we identified and have highlighted over the past few weeks. We're going to implement a comprehensive review and approval process across a variety of HR pieces as well. The personnel benefits transactions piece I mentioned earlier ties to this as well. How do we ensure that the sheriff's office is working in a consistent way with the rest of the organization around what gets posted, what gets approved for posting, how we do dual class assignments when we have work out of class assignments, how we're ensuring that those are fair and transparent at all stops along the way. And there's been questions that have come up at different times to make sure, and I want to be able to, alongside anyone working out of the sheriff's office, be able to defend the approaches being used on behalf of the organization. And to do that, we need to be working from the same sort of consistent processes, practices, and then I can hopefully be able to help provide you as a board as well with timely and accurate information. I'll stop there, Madam Chair. If you have specific questions on specific items laid out here, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I hope this shows how we're trying to take a thoughtful and comprehensive approach to ensuring that we're supporting the sheriff's office in their work so that we don't get distracted in the future by long conversations about where we're at on the budget.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Ortega.
Madam Chair, Ryan, C is the critical point for me, and that's the audit, the independent audit.
Yes, sir.
And I requested that at the workshop we had. Let me ask you a question. My fear is we can't have another year of $3 million overruns. And we can move people around, but it's still about the integrity of the process. My question is, this independent auditor will be from the outside.
Correct.
He will report to you and then to us. At what point do we, let's say in the first quarter, there's a $500,000 overrun. What is the process from that point on?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega, thank you for the question. I think it would be more of, let's say, second quarter, since we're already in the middle of February, to your point. But I think there are two ways that could look. And first of all, we're asking this auditor, and we're going to ask the sheriff's office to be sitting down with this auditor monthly for this reason. So often, we end up in a spot where the conversation says they don't understand our finances, and our response is, we do believe we understand your finances. Bringing in a third party allows another person with a lens into that conversation. If the $500,000 overrun was something that, from a budgeting perspective, they had a structural problem that was on our end, and we believe they were taking appropriate steps and still had it, it would be a different conversation with the board than if we had concerns about the way in which spending was happening on the personnel or non-personnel side. But the attempt with the auditor is to be able to cut through any sort of idea that we're not looking at the same information month over month that I can then share with you. And much of our challenge over the last few years has often been we end up in a loop around that particular conversation. So the what of how we might address that at the time somewhat depends on first getting better information to make good decisions, if that helps.
That does help. And could I follow
Yes,
up?
Commissioner Ortega.
So if it comes to a point where there is second quarter, there's $500,000 overrun, and there is structural issues, how do we need to address those structural issues? And it isn't just about hiring more people, necessarily.
Yes. Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega, I think I would say the following. There are parts of the job of the office that are statutorily defined, constitutionally defined, clear primary functions. And then there become the functions that are, as you move out from that center, things that may be high priorities and then mid priorities and lower priorities. Part of the answer, if there was a structural issue, is to say, what maybe can't we do anymore to be able to ensure we do the things we do need to do? Or have a policy discussion with the board on at what point of that prioritization can we fund versus not fund? And that's a conversation for the board to have. But I would like to be clear and bring that information into all of you so that the sheriff, alongside the board, can have a clear priorities conversation that doesn't just revolve around we need 20 more staff. Because as you see, historically, since 2015, there's been a lot of staff hired in that office, and we still end up in the same conversation we had then.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Fretham.
Yeah, thank you. This is just such an unfortunate situation. I don't want to have to do this, but you know, our job is to ensure the integrity of our budget, to ensure, and this is for all of us, that, you know, the reason we have our highest bond rating and have for a long time is we are transparent, we are responsible with our funding, we pay our bills on time. But this is frustrating, and it's something that other levels of government don't have to deal with. And I want to call that out because sometimes this becomes blown out of context that somehow we hate the sheriff or we hate police or any of that. And if a city council had a police chief that was overspending their budget by 5.5%, well, they'd probably fire them. And I think most taxpayers would agree your staff needs to do that. You know, this is not something, you know, if the commissioner of the Department of Public Safety or the state patrol captain is blowing out their budget, consequences happen. We don't have that authority, and I'm not asking for that authority, but I'm pointing out we don't have it. But this is the authority we do have. fulfill our responsibilities to manage the budget and the resources effectively. And when we have folks who are spending more than they should, that is taking money out of the pockets of other programs. It's taking money out of the pockets of our taxpayers. That is $2.7 million that could have hired more caseworkers to deliver services more effectively. That's $2.7 million that could have got people off of our streets. That's $2.7 million that could have been invested in youth programming and youth enrichment and youth outreach services and violence prevention services to stop incidents like what happened in Commissioner Zhang's district. And it is our job to make those choices and decisions. And I think, at least in my tenure, I have shown that every time the sheriff walks in here and makes his case that he needs additional funding for something, whether it is the x-ray machine or the safety check equipment, that we step up and do it. But that's something every other department also has to do, because that's how we make sure we maintain our reputation of being strong fiscal agents for the taxpayers in Ramsey County. So this is, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. We are implementing this so it doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Commissioner Fredholm. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to add to what Commissioner Frethem has said, that this is $2.7 million that we don't have. I mean, we're going to have to levy, we would have to add it to our levy on the property taxes. So this is going to raise people's property taxes because of this. And there is a budgeting process that we have and that we could have budgeted for this, but the sheriff hasn't been working with us. And I have had more people talk to me about why do you not have more control over this? And I said, well, because it's an elected position, and I do go there. I think that every city gets to appoint their own chief of police, and I do believe that there are many counties in the country and in the state that have issues with a separate elected body that gets to spend their budget that the county board has to allocate. And when we have issues like this, we don't really have control over what the sheriff does because we don't appoint him. But I am very much in favor of looking at how one might do that, so we can really be in charge of this. We are in charge of the budget. We should be in charge of the office. I know that's a longer conversation for another day, but these kinds of instances just can't keep happening. And like I said, more people have been talking to me this year about why do you not manage that? I said, well, I wish we could. So anyway, thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner McGuire. County Manager O'Connor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Commissioner McGuire, just 2 quick points. This definitely does show, to your broader conversation there about some of your broader thoughts around the relationship and where it sits. This request for board action does not opine on any of that.
No, I agree.
It tries to take as clear-headed an administrative and budgetary and programmatic approach and say, how do we work within office to prevent repetition from where we've been in the past, which was heard loud and clear with the board a few weeks ago when we had a conversation, and this is an attempt to do that. On your point about the funding, I do want to say the ask that will be in the next request for board action, this ask contains no funding. The next ask will.
Okay.
This contains controls moving forward. It does not require us to raise the property tax levy to fund it, and the chief financial officer will come up and briefly describe it. In this particular instance, it's a use of fund balance. We're going into our savings account, basically, to pay for the overspend. But if it were to go on into perpetuity, it would require a property tax increase to be able to sustainably support. And 2.7 million is almost 1% of a property tax levy. So it is a significant number.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. I know that my comments were for a longer conversation, but I was just pointing out that these kinds of actions that we're required to take, probably warrant some further discussion later on.
Thank you, Commissioner McGuire. I'll just add I'll go to Commissioner Zhang first. Commissioner Zhang.
Yeah, I would like to ask County Manager if these are the only tools that we have, or are there additional tools for holding, accountability in the overspending here?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Zhang, thank you for the question. I would answer it by saying I believe these, after working with leaders that are involved at various points of this process, I believe these to be the correct tools or the most appropriate tools. In the question of, are there other tools? In theory, maybe there are other things, and we will continue to look and learn as we go. I met with the sheriff just a few weeks ago, and we had good conversations in some ways about where priorities and structural pieces, could sit. And those conversations, these tools should help address some of where we seem to at times not be talking to, but talking past one another, and that magnifies itself to the board as well. It holds everyone accountable through these tools. And so I believe by the mix here of focusing on spending on both the personnel and non-personnel side, alongside the independent outside look to verify what is coming in month over month, so there's no chance at the end of the year we see a spot where a number inflates by more than $1 million over the course of a few months for the first time in writing. This prevents those actions from happening. It is not to say it's perfect, and it doesn't mean we won't continue to learn more along the way.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add some comments myself as I've been thinking, and I know we have 2 requests for board actions here that are related but separate. So I know
Yeah.
Commissioner McGuire, we're
went
putting
to the
some of
second
our
one, I'm
we're putting
sorry,
some
yeah.
of our thoughts together, which is okay because it really goes to the complete picture. For me, this board action is of critical importance. As we've said, it's our responsibility to oversee the sheriff's budget and to manage his spending in line with that he has promised us as the residents of Ramsey County. It's clear today that we cannot accomplish that task without beginning to address the internal leadership culture of the department. Every day, we see reminders that our criminal justice system is in dire need of reform. The Office of the Sheriff needs to be a partner in that effort, and it needs to engage with other organizations and systems involved in good faith. We need to prioritize appropriate staffing and funding of our county jails to ensure public safety and the safety of the people who are placed in our trust, but also to promote equity and fairness in the criminal justice system. We know that understaffing of county jails results in increased instances of violence, medical emergencies, and suicides within the jail. Over the past several weeks, we have learned about instances where medical attention was delayed or denied to persons in our care. This is unacceptable, and we cannot continue to operate in this manner. While the jail staffing situation must be our first priority, I'm seriously concerned about the other allegations that have also come up through this process, including suggestions of fraudulent spending and no-show jobs where employees are paid but don't actually perform the duties for which they were hired. Even the suggestion of these issues undermines public trust and confidence in our criminal justice system, and we must ensure that they are adequately and thoroughly investigated. In the meantime, we must implement these oversight and accounting controls to help correct mismanagement and to ensure that no more improper spending takes place. The sheriff's massive and intentional overspending during these last few months shows his contempt for the public trust, and he should be held accountable for that. Every dollar that he spent over his budget takes food out of the mouths of our neediest individuals. It makes our public safety net slower and less responsive. It makes our community less safe and less secure in countless ways. He may not care that he is spending your money with abandon, but as taxpayers, you should care that he doesn't think that the rules apply to him. We need to demand accountability from our sheriff and ensure that our communities are protected and our criminal justice system is effective and fair for all. I know that this board believes in transparency, accountability, and overall equity. It's time to act, and it's time to act now. These controls put in place oversight and help us to promote equity and fairness in our criminal justice system. And it's not lost on me that today we're celebrating Black History Month as we are looking at our criminal justice system, because so many of our Black and brown folks are disproportionately represented in that system. And by him not carrying out his duties, his responsibilities to taxpayers, it's disproportionately impacting our Black and brown communities. So we can't stand for that. I will tell you I'm strongly recommending a yes vote to these controls. I know that I share these concerns with all of you and that you've lifted those concerns. And I appreciate you, County Manager, and the entire leadership team that really have looked hard at this issue. It's been a point of contention for a long time. And I think that this is a positive step forward. I also want to acknowledge that I did reach out to the sheriff and invite him here today. And as you can see, he's not here, and so we can assume that that means that he's okay with these measures of controls, and I look forward to his cooperation and partnership. Thank you. Commissioner. Okay, with that, we will move to a vote. Roll call, please.
Moran.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt is absent. Jean.
Aye.
Fretham.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
And Modis Castillo.
Aye. All right, we'll move on to the fund balance for overspending in the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion second and a discussion. I'm going to invite CFO Skutska. I was distracted.
Great.
Alex, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So this action is the technical action. In order to close the books, like our accounting books for the year for Ramsey County, we do not have enough appropriations in order to close our books with this deficit. So we are asking for up to $2.8 million in ability to close the year end. We will not use any funds that are not needed as we finalize this. But basically how it works, so you kind of understand, is right now we're sitting with negative expenditures on our books. We can't finish a year like that, so we have to ask you all for the money on the expenditure side to be able to do that. To your question earlier, Commissioner McGuire, where this money comes from, we are asking for the use of fund balance. At the close of 2021, we had $169 million in our unrestricted fund balance. This is a significant amount of money. I don't want to downplay that, but we do have enough in our savings account to pay for this without an impact on a one-time basis to the taxpayers of Ramsey County. So how this will work is if we get a yes vote today, my staff will work to close out the books of the Sheriff's Office, and we will be able to close the year and report back to you on our overall, how we finish the year within the next, I don't want to put too much pressure on my staff, but 4 to 6 weeks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Commissioner Ortega and then Commissioner McGuire.
Well, my question is, I mean, I am going to vote in the affirmative, giving the prior or resolutions we passed in terms of the controls. But let me ask you this: what if we're at this time next year and we have $1 million deficit, whatever it is? I guess my question is, what, or better yet, let me change the question. What if we weren't to pay the $2.5 million? What's the next process?
Thank you,
Or the
Matt.
$3 million?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega. Thank you for the question. It's a really good question, and I've contemplated with my staff what would happen if the board did not allow this fund. We would delay and come back and ask you again. I don't have a good path forward on the expenditure side to be able to pay these. These funds have been spent. We have obligated, the Sheriff's Office has spent over $2.7 million above what they were appropriated to spend. And in order to pay those bills, I need your authority to be able to do that. It can be delayed, but I have not found another path forward that would allow me to do that. I'm happy to consult with our county attorney's office on that. To your other question, if I may, Madam Chair, I think it's a really good point to think about where we are in the year. Knowing about the $2.7 million after the year has closed makes it very difficult for me to come forward with any ideas or tools of how we can manage that. Knowing sooner in the year and understanding where we are in May, June, July, then you come forward with lots of tools and ability to say, okay, here are the options on the table. Either we can control some of that spending, we can look for other revenue, or we can ask you all in partnership with the Sheriff's Office for these are places they are experiencing stresses. Do you as a board want to increase their appropriations mid-year due to that, or do we want to take other actions to control it? When you don't know until the year has shut, I don't have those tools to come forward, and you don't have the options that you should have to address that.
Well, Madam Chair, my point is, I guess I'm not being very optimistic, and I usually am, but I'm assuming we might be in the same spot next year.
Right.
And then I'm saying, any other organization, there are measures you could take. In essence, you gotta pay back. You might extend it over 3 or 4 years, but you gotta take appropriate measures to reduce your expenses to manage within that new budget. I guess we need to explore what those possibilities, because we can make all the pretty speeches in the world. The reality is that we need to change the behavior and how we're doing business. And that we should start thinking about that now. And where do we draw the line and deal with it? I mean, it'll be creating a crisis, but sometimes that's what you gotta do.
Thank you, Commissioner Ortega. Point well made. County Manager O'Connor.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega, thank you for those comments. And I want to add one piece to what the CFO said, and I want to finish on where you just went. The question around what are the options left is actually one of the most important that was communicated a few weeks ago when we started this conversation, which is it both feels and is accurate at this point to acknowledge that the entity that is here to set the budget for this public organization, the county board, had that authority removed from them in this particular instance, and now is being forced to fund an obligation that they never prioritized through their thoughtful budget process through the year. And that's a hard reality to where we currently sit, and one that we need to acknowledge and then say, so to your point, when you talk about next year, it is my responsibility in working with all of you and with working with Alex and this entire organization to not come back in this spot again, ever. It's not okay. It's not a spot that anyone here feels good about where we now sit today, because the board never authorized the money before it got spent. And that is problematic from my seat and yours and the broader public, as mentioned. In terms of what that means for controls, the tools in front of us here, I believe, will enforce discipline to the budget as passed, in the same way that we enforce discipline with every other place in the organization. We do not allow obligations to happen ahead of time. And so to that end, we will, if need be, come in aggressively next year. I will come back to you aggressively as the year is going on to have these conversations, because I do not want to make this ask on behalf of the organization again. I feel that we have to do better to prevent it from ever happening, and it does rely upon trust from all parties. And that is a part of this that comes with it, is the sheriff needs to commit alongside us to doing better. We will use every tool we have to help ensure that occurs. But government is based on the idea that those we elect and appoint do good work on behalf of the public. And there's a serious and solemn responsibility with that, and we will hold him to that, and I ask that you hold us to that as well.
Thank you, County Manager O'Connor. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you, CFO Kutza. So you've mentioned the fund balance, which we're going to, this will be allocated out of that. What else, what do we do with the fund balance? I mean, it's usually there because of emergencies and things that we may need, and we've seen where we've had to use it in the past. And so it's not good to be budgeting out of a fund balance. I mean, could you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire. So fund balance is, as you think about it, your savings account. I've come before you plenty of times in my tenure here about the rainy day, and with COVID and different we've basically been in that situation since I got here. So you use it for those things, right? You have it. If you remember back in August, we do a presentation about the overall status of the budget, and we talked about the rule for the county, or your recommendation, your ordinance is we have to have 2 months of operating expenditures. We are closer to 4 than 2, so we definitely, which helps us get higher ratings. It helps us get lower interest rates that we just got on the bonds that we sold. It helps us be a AAA rated county, and so we do have significant reserves. But they're used for plenty of things. We've come forward, we've budgeted them for one-time items in the budget. We use them in situations such as this, maybe coming forward. Previously, we've come forward for the sheriff, actually, for contingency funding, which ultimately would go back to the fund balance if not used, for civil unrest and costs that are really unanticipated and one-time in nature. So that's generally how we use fund balance. I can give you more examples if you
Yeah,
need
no,
them.
I appreciate that. I think it's just, as we've all been saying, you know, we have a budgeting process that we have. It's a very thoughtful process. We bring all of our departments in, we talk about all of our priorities, and then we give a budget, which we did with the sheriff's office. He, as we've all been saying, overspent that by almost $3 million. And then it requires that we take it out of a fund balance that is there as a savings, as a rainy day fund, and has not been part of the budgeting process that we all spend a lot of time on. And so I'm just going to reiterate, I'm grateful to the county for putting in the measures that we did in the previous motion to hopefully make this something that we don't have to see again. And I mean, none of us want to do this because we don't think this is a proper way to be budgeting. But as you've said, you're going to come back to us. You're going to keep coming back to us until we do it. It feels like. So feels like
I agree with you. I wish I didn't have to do that either, Commissioner McGuire.
So we have a snowmageddon about to hit. It could potentially be an unforeseen emergency. If we drain this fund balance, how do we respond given it's this year? What's the plans in place for that?
So, Madam Chair, the fund balance goes across years, right? So as we close the books, you would either see a contribution to fund balance or a use of fund balance at the end of the year. We're coming forward now because we need fund balance to actually close our books. We will then figure out when everything closes where we end the year. So with Snowmageddon coming, and that if there was a need, so it's early in 2023. I would never anticipate, as your chief financial officer, it would be very rare for me to come early in a year, because what I would say to any department, including the sheriff or public works or any department, please try and manage this within your budget. In any given budget, our priorities and the work that we do shifts and changes, right? So early in a calendar year, early in a budget year, you have appropriations and you have money. So let's think about how we use that going into the rest of the year and plan. So for example, my staff is going to be spending a lot of time on the sheriff's office. I have to look at the priorities of how I do that, shift around my priorities, and make sure that I have the staff and the funding to be able to do that without coming here and asking you for additional funds. So we will do that, and let's say we get 4 more Snowmageddons this year, and they just can't, I know, I'm sorry, they can't manage it. Then we would come forward. I would work with the deputy county manager, I would work with the directors, we would put together a proposal, and we would say this was very unforeseen and historically different, just like we did with civil unrest. And we would come forward and we would explain, likely sometime in the fall, that is when, as your advisor, that is when we would know, I don't think they're gonna make it through the year. Let's come proactively, explain to you what has happened. And then you can think about if that's a good use of funds or not. And you still have a quarter left of the year. If you say, nope, that's not where we wanna go, then we have to manage really well that last quarter of the year.
Got it. Thank you. Commissioner Moran, did you have a question?
Thank you,
Yeah.
Madam Chair. I just want to first just say thank you for the work that you do. You know, it's not an easy task to make sure that we are efficient with the dollars that we have to do the work that's going to create great outcomes for what we want to do as a county board. So thank you for that. So as a new commissioner on the job 30 plus days or so, you know, and as I read what is before me, I just want to share this with the public, what I'm reading. So the sheriff's office has benefited from infusion of additional funding from the Ramsey County Board in many instances since 2006. These actions have repeatedly demonstrated that the Ramsey County Board will ensure resources are available within the sheriff's office and all operating entities to support staffing and programmatic needs that extend beyond the initial authorized budget amounts when appropriate. So we have an attachment here that shows the request for board action that shows that the sheriff's office has received, listen to this number, public, the sheriff's office has received $9,263,943 in additional funding from the Ramsey County Board from the years 2006 to 2021, which exclude the $2.7 million now being requested of the Ramsey County Board at the end of 2022 to address his overspending. Specifically, looking at the years of 2019 and through 2021, the Sheriff's Office received $2,982,737 in spending beyond initially budget allocation. So Ramsey County departments, we are responsible for ensuring effective use of taxpayer dollars and ensuring transparent accounting of how dollars are spent to comply with the budget allocation set by the Ramsey County Board. Departments are therefore expected to address unanticipated expense through careful management and reprioritization of other funds to stay within their annual budget whenever possible. If ever unforeseen circumstances and budgetary pressures are allowed to increase operating budget across the organization, spending will increase at an unreasonable and unsustainable rate. Budget pressures that cannot be managed within the department are to be communicated to service teams and finance leadership as soon as possible. I'm sure that's you, to your office, to help manage the problem before year end. For example, in 2021, it states that the Sheriff's Office faced projections of large year-end budget deficit, but chose to work throughout the year with the service team controller and chief financial officers to address budgetary challenges and implement changes that resulted in meeting their budget for those years. The lack of active budgetary management by the Sheriff's Office during 2022 resulted in a level of overspending that now requires an infusion of funds from Ramsey County General Operation Reserve to ensure the organization fulfill all of its 2022 budget obligations. And so before us, we have item 8, which makes me real hard to say yes, right? To say yes to this office, who has consistently overspent dollars in a way that money could have gone to support children, families, housing, homelessness, and we can go on and on and on. But you come before us saying that we need to close the books. And if you don't do it today, we can't close the books. And so to our county manager, I just want to say thank you for all of the controls that you have put before us today. Out of control spending without accountability is not what Ramsey County stands for. And we have to have some controls, you know, even though I don't feel so good about wanting to close out and pay almost $3 million in overspending. I just can't fathom how someone would think that is okay. But we can see this behavior that has increased year after year after year, right? And Ramsey County is saying no more. We have to be accountable. He has to be accountable and held accountable through these controls. You know, it's like a little child. You know, you don't want to put all the rules down, but sometimes we have to. If the behaviors continues to show up, that is impacting the work that we need to do here in Ramsey County. That goes beyond just public safety. So we'll see what that vote look like. I'm not happy. I'm not happy at all what we see before us. But I do appreciate the work that you do. I don't want your job. I wouldn't have your job. It is not an easy job to do what you do, but a so needed job. And I thank you for your work.
Thank you, Commissioner Moran. Commissioner Fredham, and then Commissioner Zhang.
You're right. This isn't a fun job. No one wants to be the teacher saying, show your work. No one likes that teacher, but that's our job. And to that end, we've got controls in place for next year. We know we have to fund this. I would really like to see I'd prefer an independent investigation into how this money was overspent, because this is the second time he's come to us with a big overspend. And, his solution is, well, we need more staff, but he's not even filling the staff positions that we have open. So that doesn't even make sense as a solution. And we know that hiring is hard, and that's one of the reasons I've asked for 2 years now to have a workshop on how we're supporting our deputies. How do we train? How do we create a culture where these folks who are doing really hard work in really hard social conditions, that's also really important and dangerous, not only for them, for other people if they get it wrong. How are we making sure that they're okay and able to come to work every day and show up and do their best job? I want to know, because I care about them, and I think being able to showcase if we're doing things right is what's going to bring more people to Ramsey County to want to work here. But I do think we need to find out how this money was spent, how is the overage, and have someone tell us whether it is structural or maybe we do need to do something differently, because the solutions we're being offered by the sheriff right now don't make sense. And I've got to say, some of my constituents share this concern. I got a series of emails from one regular viewer of Sheriff Fletcher's Friday night shows, very confused, very concerned about why a county official is begging citizens and non-citizens to donate to his department's work, but then what's happening to those donations? Supposedly these donations are intended to go towards helping people they encounter during their patrols, unsheltered people, but some of the regular donors have started to question the uses they have gone to, as he only shows himself giving away a few gift cards here and there, nowhere near the amount they have been donating, much less all the donors. One person who actually had gone on a ride-along with the deputy has reported that he saw cards being given out to deputies to use for their own food and gas needs. Hard to prove, but not out of character for him, according to this constituent. And this constituent suggests the full accounting audit of his spending, and also suggests in a later email that when the show started, it was clear that it was, a cell phone and an anti-vibration dash mount, but sometime last summer, they started upgrading and now run multiple cars using multiple commercial-grade cameras with high-end professional mounts and software writing to allow remote switching between the cars, and a couple of programmers to make it all work and manage. And he wants to know, is this where some of the extra $2.5 million went to? And if this is equipment purchased on county's funds, it should be on our asset list so it doesn't disappear. So I want to know, what was this spent on? We know some of it. We know that there were higher food costs. We talked about it when he came in earlier, and we said, of course, we're going to pay for more food. We know that the budget was higher, but we need to see what that dollar amount is when you come in at the end. It wasn't $2.5 million higher. So what else was that being spent on? I want an accounting. I want taxpayers. I am a taxpayer in Ramsey County. I want to know what I bought for that money. And so I would really like someone to come back and share that. And I know I'm going to be the mean mom asking for someone to show his work. But I am a mean mom, and I get told that multiple times a day, and it doesn't bother me anymore.
Thank you, Commissioner Fretham. CFO Kutza.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Fretham, just to clarify a couple things. Their food overspending was about $588,000 prior year. We also have a donation and a gift card policy. So if the Sheriff's Office would like to go over those, I'd be happy to review those and make sure that any donations or gift cards that are being used in accordance with our policies.
County Manager O'Connor.
And Madam Chair, I'll just add, on the part about the look back, we agree that the memo produced by the Sheriff's Office leaves it unclear as to what was bought specifically for the $2.7 million. There's a lot there to follow, and the CFO's memo responded to a lot of that, and you can see that. We will work to do that, and the action you took previously, part of an independent auditor is also gaining an understanding for where we've been to be able to then move forward. And so that is encompassed within what's here. I do want to go back to Commissioner Ortega's earlier point. We're going to start, though, by making sure we set a baseline for this year right now to not be back here in 12 months. So I would only ask for a little bit of patience while we make sure to get a strong baseline for this year so we don't spend 6 months on a look back and then realize we lost 6 months of time to actively work together.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Fretham, for raising those points. I hadn't heard about the online donation requests, and I'm very disturbed, and we should certainly add that to the list of concerns. Commissioner Zhang.
Thank you. I just want to add on, deeply concerned and disturbed. And I have been going back and forth about whether or not to approve this, as I had mentioned last week, about needing a full accounting too of where the money has been spent. And at the end of the day, it just seems like, we basically just have to approve this because it comes at a cost. If we don't approve it, our rating goes down. If we try to find other ways to pay for it, like here, like what I'm told is that just does not look good for us, for our credit rating either. So I'm very concerned, but I think that the controls that we have in place here with what we had just passed will help us to accomplish that and continue more dialogues about where the spending is going, just as I have seen it from when I've reviewed the letter from the sheriff's office. It just doesn't address anything. It just basically says that we've spent this and this because of all these events that have happened, but then those are just real operational costs too that should have been planned for as well. So I don't see any near where we're at a crisis or anything where it deserves the one-time funding. Because again, this funding that we have is for, basically like the rainy day. And from the examples that you have given, it just sounds like this does not constitute as one of those things. It's just basically overspending across the board in his budget. What I read was that it was across everything except for community engagement in that area. So it's super deeply concerning, but I will say that, with the controls in place that we have, and thank you for reviewing all of that. Thank you, County Manager, for just looking back at what we can do to control the budget moving forward and making sure this doesn't happen again. So with that, I will be supporting this action.
Thank you. Any other comments? I just want to share, I think, as all of you, I'm frustrated that we're in a position for the greater good of the entire organization and all of our departments that worked really hard to stay within their budgets, to manage accordingly, for your leadership and your entire team that have been working, that there's one department, the Sheriff's Department, that is woefully irresponsible and is not cooperating with the greater organization of Ramsey County as one system. It's very frustrating that we're stuck in this place. And unfortunately, it feels like they get to continue bad behavior without the controls because we are looking out for the whole organization. So just want to share that frustration that we are the responsible board in these matters, and to make sure that we're moving the entire organization ahead, and just further emphasizes the need for those controls and extra measures. So yeah, County Manager O'Connor.
Madam Chair, just a summary to that. I just want to thank all of you for your comments, but also for your support. I understand it's not an easy ask to be here with, and so in any of the stories that ever get written about, or the conversations that happen after these meetings where it's like, this is in any way, these are hard days, these are hard meetings, these are hard days, and you dedicate your life to this work, and we do the same. And so to be here on days like this is never easy for anyone, and the steps taken here are a solemn attempt to work past it so that we're not back here in this way again. Nobody benefits from these moments, and I appreciate the degree to which you are supporting the organization so that it will do better going forward, and for the work that this board has done over many years to build a fund balance that allows it to be in a spot of financial health that it can respond in this difficult moment. I also want to acknowledge the couple of pieces that got raised here about some of the concerns from a constituent and other things. If you are hearing concerns that are coming your way, I would ask that you continue to make sure you're sharing that with us so that we may look into each of those issues as they arise, and we will keep that conversation going. And in hopes also that the sheriff can help explain and answer questions where we may not have the immediate answer. There are questions embedded in Commissioner Fretham's things that I think he is the best situated to help answer, and that's part of the conversation that I want to continue to facilitate going forward. So thank you very much for your conversation today. It helped us as we think about the next year.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to a roll call vote.
Moran,
I must say aye.
Ortega,
Aye.
Reinhardt is absent. Zhang,
Aye.
Freda,
Aye.
McGuire,
Aye.
and Modis Castillo.
Aye. That was the most reluctant ayes
I know.
ever.
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that. And thank you for your work, CFO. Good to. With that, we will move on to our agenda. We have our legislative update.